Good evening, Steeler fans. It is Wednesday night here at Behind the Steel Curtain, and that means it's time for the Curtain Call podcast. I'm Jeffrey Benedict. I'm your host. Every week with me, right over here, Shannon White. Shannon, how you doing tonight?
Doing great. Just looking forward to the show.
All right. And with us tonight to talk about the Steelers' fourth round wide receiver, Calvin Austin III, Kevin Fielder. Kevin, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing awesome, guys. It's a little hot down here in South Florida, just a little bit. We haven't hit peak summer like 99 degrees, but other than that, I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on, and we're excited today to talk about one of the more intriguing and interesting draft picks the Steelers had in Calvin Austin III. Now, real quick, Kevin, how good is Calvin Austin III? What is he in Memphis? Is he like one of their top receivers they've had? Is he like, he was our number one receiver for a couple of years? Where does he stand in Memphis football for receivers?
I think he's near the top. You look at a guy like Calvin Austin who's had two 1,000-yard receiving seasons. His first two seasons of getting actual, real football times, given that he started as a walk-on, didn't play much early on in his career. And then it was really 2019 when he started to get some playing time after, one of their wide receivers suffered a knee injury. And then 2020 and 2021, he was their guy pretty much. Every time that they needed a big play, it would be him. Every time they needed that energy to come on offense, it was him, and he was flat out unstoppable at times. Even if he was a little bit short for the position, he was straight up unstoppable at times. It seemed like.
It seems like the guys his size, they either make it or they don't. It depends on their ability to break tackles, like arm tackles. Like we've had the Steelers have picked up guys in the past, and they be running an end and a guy'd get one hand on them, grab their jersey, and they just go down. And then you see other guys, they might be small, Darren Sproles or Tariq Hill or somebody like that, and they got that power that, if you just get a hold of them, that don't mean they're going down. They're going to they can pull away, in other words. How was he? Did you see any of that? I'm not expecting him to break a lot of tackles, obviously, at his size in the NFL, but if it's just a weak one, grab one arm tackle, is he capable of breaking that tackle?
I thought he was. You kind of mentioned he's not going to break every tackle. He's not the 6 foot, 190-pound receiver that teams somewhat usually look for. He probably weighed 160 in college at times, but what he lacked for in that pure strength, he was just as elusive as anyone on the field. He had as much speed as anyone on the field. The cliche in the NFL draft terms is he's quote unquote quicker than fast. He's that, he's quicker than fast. He could straight up, turn on the Jets in 2 minutes and be, 30 yards down the field without a problem. When the ball got in his hands, I think that was really when he shined. He was a really good route runner, but when he got the ball in his hands, he was really able to make guys miss and create big time plays for Memphis's offense. And he was particularly their energy guy, where if you needed the big play, he was there to have it.
So for Steeler fans, like if we were going to compare a guy with like high end straight line speed, like Mike Wallace, that's not quite Calvin Austin III. He'd be more of the Antonio Brown player who's shifty, he's slipping guys, dodging tackles more than just boom, take off and outrun everybody to the end zone.
He's kind of both. There were plenty of times where he was just straight up faster than everyone, going straight down the line. There were times where he would be, step to step with the cornerback, and then you'd blink and he's 4 yards of separation. He catches the ball. He wouldn't have to make a guy miss. He was used a lot as like the vertical threat wide receiver, the deep threat. And he was just really dang good at it. Just flat out, he was able to just be faster, be more athletic, be more agile. And I think, you talk about some of these faster wide receivers, they don't all pan out. As a Miami Dolphins fan, Mike Wallace didn't pan out for us, as a deep threat straight line receiver. But there are, what he has is he has the all the other stuff that you look for with a wide receiver, the route running, the ability after the catch, the hands, the return ability. He's not just, your typical, he runs a 4.3, so he's really fast, kind of wide receiver. And, we'll have to teach him how to do everything else. He kind of comes in with somewhat of a base to where he can kind of contribute on a team immediately, as opposed to having to sit 2 or 3 years and learn how to play the position.
As a born and bred hillbilly, I'm a, big Mountaineer, West Virginia Mountaineer fan. Mountaineers had Tavon Austin back in the day, and he was a dominant force at college. And I thought that when he got to the pros, it was going to translate. It didn't happen. Again, because, you have to have that extra speed, that extra gear to take the corner in the NFL, to get that separation. That's my biggest concern is if they could get him, get the defense flowing one way, get him the ball, in misdirection. I think he's got that speed to take the edge. Was he used a lot in some, I don't want to say gimmick plays, or gadget plays, or was he pretty much just straight starting wide receiver?
I can tell he played in a lot of different roles. When I was watching him at Memphis, and then as a quote unquote draft nerd, who likes to watch these prospects during the off season of college football and into the draft. The one thing that stood out to me was he played a lot of different roles. He was primarily Memphis's X wide receiver, which means he was, tethered to the line of scrimmage. He wasn't used in motion as much, but 2019, he given that he wasn't used as much, when he first got in the field after the injury and made a big play against, if I remember correctly, it was Louisiana Monroe. 2 months later, he was being used as the energy guy. He was being used in certain packages where only he could do it, because straight up, he was one of the fastest players in college football. When he got the ball in his hands, he was faster than everyone else. And he has that natural gift for speed. He was a track star all throughout high school, and he was, he has, I think, 3 Memphis school records, in track, as a part of their relay teams. I will say, in terms of separation and creating separation, I think the one thing that people sort of don't understand, and it's hard because football is sometimes a very nuanced sport, and that there are certain things that some guys do really well and other guys don't, is he was really good at the line of scrimmage of breaking presses. He didn't do it the same way as other guys. He wasn't going to get really physical with you and, just put your hands on you and push you down. But what he was going to do is he was going to use his feet to manipulate the eyes of a defensive back and, force the defensive back to think that he's running an out route or running a streak. And then he'd break back inside and he'd be wide open. That was something, if you look back at the Senior Bowl highlights, that was something he did a lot during the practices. At the Senior Bowl was being able to, break inside quickly and have 3 or 4 yards of separation that most other guys his size wouldn't necessarily have.
So you think in the NFL, you'd say he's probably going to be used on a lot of routes coming across the field more than those would be his stronger routes rather than straight vertical routes, stuff like that.
It's really hard to predict these 5'7" guys, because I think the natural thing is you look at a guy who's 5'7" and 170 pounds and you go, yeah, I mean, he's a slot wide receiver. He's not tall enough to play as an X wide receiver in the NFL, because, in the NFL, all the cornerbacks are 6'2" and freaks of nature who are, who would be unicorns in college football. But I think if Matt Canada and the Pittsburgh Steelers offense wanted to really utilize him properly, I would initially start him off as sort of a shorter wide receiver, get the ball in his hands, let him try and make guys miss, let him make home run plays out of nothing. I think that you can still use him deep. You can still use him deep down the field and he'll make guys miss. He played NFL cornerbacks. Particularly there's one game against Houston where he played Damarion Williams and Marcus Jones, 2 guys who were drafted by the Ravens and Patriots respectively, and he was able to make guys miss, and he was able to take these NFL cornerbacks drafted early on in the draft and make them look silly at times. And there was one play in particular against Marcus Jones where he just did a quick little hesitation move and had 2 yards of separation against a guy who's going to potentially start at cornerback for the Patriots. So I think if you're talking about using him properly early on, I think I'd use him more as in developing crosses, drags, slants. Let him get open, let him make guys miss, and then when defenses are starting to focus down on him, then you can just hit the defense deep, potentially with him, or some of those other wide receivers on that roster.
As Steeler fans, we've really yet to see Matt Canada's offense. We've had to go back and look at his previous stops in college because he hasn't had the personnel. I would like to see, based on some of his usage in the past, the way he used Quandre Henderson at Pittsburgh. It seems like Calvin Austin III is a great fit for that role. And I could see plays where they would have Harris and have Austin in the backfield and then motion him out. He does so much pre-snap movement and try to create mismatches because, that's where Austin is really going to shine. If you can get him, kind of scheme him open, scheme the mismatch. And it's going to, at the very least, it's going to create so much havoc and concern for the defense that it should open up stuff for other players. And so that was, did you ever see him take any snaps out of the backfield?
I couldn't tell you. I don't think he took many in the backfield since, primarily Memphis have always had very talented running backs. You look in the past, guys like Patrick Taylor and Antonio Gibson have made it to the NFL. But I think he could definitely be used in that role. I think usage and role is really based on frame in the NFL and can you play in the certain positions. I think that you will see him play sometimes as as a running back and then kind of shift into those slot wide receiver positions or, even potentially further out wide. And, then you'll see kind of quick breaking routes or streak routes. I think you'll see some of that. I'm not sure if you'll see it as much as, you saw with Canada and Ollison at Pittsburgh, but I think he can definitely do it.
Now, we talked a little bit about him running gadget plays and line up the backfield, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about is his rushing numbers for his career. I looked them up because I was like, oh, did he run that stuff? He ran the ball 8 times in 4 years, only 8 times, but ran it for 169 yards and 3 touchdowns. So is this something that he that was just so foreign to the offense that teams weren't ready for it? Was he running things that were like similar to a gadget play, but they were actually screen passes, or they registered? I know the Steelers have done it there. They line up in shotgun and do a jet sweep, but it counts as a pass because the ball leaves the quarterback's hand and goes forward. Were there plays like that where he was used a lot in screens and little plays like that just to get him the ball quickly and have a block or two to let him work off of? Or was he really just used as an X receiver where he's out there and he's lined up and he's playing similar like Antonio Brown was for the Steelers?
He mostly played X wide receiver, in college, but you can't sit there and say that he didn't run gadget plays. And, I think some of the gadget plays were like end arounds and, different jet sweeps where they would count as passes or whatever. Again, the way they grade some of those plays is even foreign to me, sometimes, but he's kind of really done it all. He's primarily an X wide receiver who's primarily, ran vertical routes or ran more deeper developing, in routes and crossing routes. And really, I think at points, if you look at Memphis's offense historically and you look at it under Kevin John, John's their most recent offensive coordinator, even previously with Mike Norvell, who's currently at Florida State, a lot of it was trying to get the ball in your playmakers' hands and let them make plays. Sometimes football is as simple as if you've got an athlete, let's use the athlete and try and make plays with the athlete. And that was really the case with, Calvin Austin at times, as he was the best athlete on the offense. So they had to find ways to get him the ball, and that would be in screens and, end arounds and even just quicker, in a mesh pattern. They'd use him as one of the drag routes. Just they pass the ball and he'd get open and, we'd make 3 guys miss and we'd be talking about a 50-yard play on a 3-yard pass. And that's kind of what separates Calvin Austin from other guys is, yeah, he can win deep, but he can also just catch the ball and straight up make guys miss in space. And that is kind of what takes him to that next level as a wide receiver.
There was one highlight I saw that he got the ball in an end around misdirection play, like I was talking about it. One thing I noticed about him that you didn't see out of a lot of the receivers, the really fast guys this year, when he hits the seam, he doesn't slow down. If anything, he accelerates. Now, most little guys, when they go to hit that seam, they kind of decelerate just slightly. because if they get Kidd, they're going to get blown up. He accelerates through the seams, and he took it the distance. The Steelers signed Gunnar Olkowski to be the new kick and punt returner, but Austin has that ability, especially when you consider that speed and how he will accelerate into traffic. It seems like he had some return touchdowns for Memphis. Did he have any issues with his hands as, say, a punt returner?
Yeah, he had a couple muffs, throughout his career. I think they were just kind of focused muffs where you kind of lose focus for a minute and you just kind of muff the ball. So I don't know if he'll be primarily used as a punt returner or kick returner for Pittsburgh because Gunnar, I'm going to butcher his last name, so I'll probably just skip that for now. But, when you look at a guy like him, he's as safe hands as it gets as the kick returner, punt returner. And I think that's kind of why New England used him so often in that position, is just because he catches the ball and, he might not take the ball 50 yards for a touchdown, but he'll guarantee you that you get the ball. And that's sometimes as important. But I think if Pittsburgh needs a big play on a special teams, there may be no better guy on the offense. There may be very few guys in the NFL who have that kind of potential with the ball in their hands to, make a couple guys miss and really give your offense, really good field position on plays.
Sorry, my mic was muted there. What thing I wanted to ask you, and I think we talked about it a little bit before the show. If he was taller, right? If Calvin Austin was 5'10" or even like 6 foot tall, where would we be talking about him in the draft? Where would he have gone? Like, what would his ceiling be viewed if you take this exact receiver and you just make him bigger?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it, Christian Watson, 6'2" or 6'3", I don't remember what he measured in at the combine, but he was super fast and he went early or kind of late second round to, a team that desperately needed a wide receiver. And I thought, when I was kind of looking at teams that needed wide receivers, the first ones that came to mind were the Kansas City Chiefs, who had traded Tyreek Hill at that point. I thought the Packers wouldn't really particularly be interested because they have kind of already those smaller wide receivers. But I looked at Kansas City and I thought, man, in the second, third round, there may be no better guy for them to take. And that's at 5'7". If you make him 5'10", 5'11", and you say, with his route running ability, his ability to create separation, his ability to, be really fast on his breaks and on his stems on routes, he could have probably gone first round. If he had the same success that he did at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine, he posted a 9.04 relative athletic score, which is through the roof for a guy at his size. I thought he could have gone first round if he was 5'11", and you weren't looking at it and going, he's too short to play wide receiver for some teams, because some teams like the 6'2" wide receivers. I didn't see anything in his talent that would have said that he couldn't be a first round pick or even like a really early second round pick.
I just like jump right. I'm sorry. I'll jump into to add to what you're saying there. I did a thing comparing his RAS score, his relative athletic score, to Tyreek Hill's, and the big difference between them, like the big difference between their numbers, was in the bench press.
Yeah,
everything else, all his speed, his agility, his jumping, everything was like right there or better than Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill had a better bench press score, so that's what got him a better, and he weighed a little bit more, and that's the entire reason Tyreek Hill had a higher RAS score than Calvin Austin III. So I thought that was incredible.
Yeah, Calvin Austin was, if you're looking for a player comp, and I'm not going to sit here and lie to people and go, he's the next Tyreek Hill, pack it up, he's going to be arguably a top 3 wide receiver in football right now. If you're looking for a player comp and how you can use him properly and really have him execute in the NFL, Tyreek Hill's the perfect comparison. You look at how the Chiefs have used Tyreek Hill, deep routes, breaking routes, screen routes. He's used in every certain situation. If you can kind of develop the rest of Calvin Austin's route tree, and I think that the Steelers can if you focus a little bit on it and, just don't let him stick to what he's been doing consistently and just kind of say that's enough. I think Tyreek Hill is a perfect usage comp. Again, I'm not going to sit here and try and tell everyone that, he's the next Tyreek Hill, book it, buy his jerseys now, but he can definitely be very similar to that. I thought Taylor Gabriel of the Bears was another solid comp in the fact that, Taylor Gabriel for a long time was one of the better slot wide receivers in football. And he was just flat out faster and he was flat out more athletic than a lot of guys. And, for a while there, he just didn't get a role. I saw someone on Twitter mention that you could use him as potentially like a Tariq Cohen, who's used in the backfield, used in the slot. I think you could see that as well. When you have a guy of his frame and his size, the possibilities of how you can use him is endless. It's really just up to an offensive coordinator being creative enough with him to put him in different roles.
As you said, it's all about location, location, location. Where you go. I mean, Tariq Hill is a better professional than he was collegiate.
Yep.
I watched him in college, and I wasn't impressed. And a lot of people wasn't, obviously. And he gets into the pros, and he gets with Andy Reid, and he gets with Patrick Mahomes, and in that system, and he's perfect. He's a weapon. Now, I think that, now can Canada do that same thing with Austin? I'm not sure. But, like he was talking about his RAS score, if you look at it, everything's green, everything's elite, except for his height and his weight. So, he's going to always have to get around it. But he says himself, he's got some dog in him. He's tough. And so for a guy to be able to play in the slot in the NFL, and work at middle of the field, you're going to have to be tough. Did you see a lot of that toughness?
Yeah, I mean, Shannon, I'll tell you this right now. His senior year, this past season, I believe it was 2021, he was playing with a pretty bad ankle injury. I believe it was an injury that could have caused him to miss some games. I believe he still ended up playing 12 games, started in 10 of them. But he was playing on an ankle injury that could have sidelined him. But, if you watch the tape, if I put on the tape for you right now and never told you that he had an ankle injury, you would never know he had an ankle injury because he was still faster than everyone else. And, ankle injuries can affect your speed, can affect how fast you are, can affect how you get to that top speed. I never saw a situation where he lost his top speed. If he wants to be faster than everyone else, he can flat out be faster than everyone else. But he's one tough mofo in a sense of like, he's not afraid to take a hit. He's not afraid, he might be 5'7", but he takes a hit. He's going to pop right back up like nothing ever happened. And that's kind of what separates him from some of these other 5'7" guys is they shy away from contact. They'll run out of bounds. They'll go, I don't want to get hit because it could be a really bad injury. He was never afraid. And I think that kind of goes back to him being a walk-on. He never was guaranteed a scholarship. He was recruited by Memphis to be on their track team. But he had told Memphis that the only way he would commit to Memphis is if he was also on the football team. And, Memphis couldn't offer him a scholarship for football. So they put him as a preferred walk-on. 2019, he comes in the game, and he impresses enough to be offered the scholarship that same year, mid-season. You don't see that as often in college football. Usually done at the end of the season, during the next spring camp. But he's tougher because I think just flat out, he never was guaranteed a role on Memphis's football team.
Wow. No, that is interesting. You mentioned a Taylor Gabriel. We've mentioned a Tyreek Hill. Would you say like a Taylor Gabriel type production, where your second, third receiver on the team is kind of where he belongs, or do you think there's a realistic chance of him being a number one receiver in the NFL, playing that X role, being the number one guy, being the focus of an offense, or do you see him better off being a guy that kind of takes advantage of the space other players create?
I think in the NFL, the realistic comp is going to be that he's going to be the wide receiver 2 or 3 on a team, just because, again, if you look at the NFL, not many 5'7" guys are wide receiver ones, and Tyreek Hill very well could just be a unicorn in the sense that, he got really lucky in the right situation for him to develop, and Pittsburgh could very well be that for Calvin Austin. But still, if he's a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, you look at the teams that have won Super Bowls, so many of them have had so many good contributions from the wide receiver 2 and the wide receiver 3, because if teams are going to key in on your wide receiver 1, you got to have guys who are ready to ball out. And Calvin Austin's going to be a guy who's, who can take a play 65 yards for a touchdown, and you just go, I don't know what just happened. And there were times when I was watching him in Memphis where he would score a touchdown, and I'd look and I'd go, I don't really know how he scored that touchdown, but maybe that's just him being faster than everyone else. And I likened him to like Sonic the Hedgehog, Speedy Gonzalez. I don't think he's ever, taken, like, I don't know if there's ever been a play where he's been slow. I think he's just flat out as good of an athlete as you can get. And I think that's why teams were so interested in him. I think that's why the Ravens were so disappointed when the Steelers drafted him before. I think that's why plenty of teams had him on their draft board for the 4th and 5th round. And that's why I was shocked personally that he didn't go in the 3rd round. I thought a team would have gotten interested in his production, and go, he's a better 3rd-round pick than some of those other wide receivers selected. But, he's a perfect wide receiver 3 in the NFL, a really good complementary guy who you can use on gadget plays. And, you can let him run around and, just kind of make guys miss in space, because that's kind of what the NFL is turning into. It's less about, winning matchups. It's honestly more about getting playmakers into space and letting them make plays for you. And I think that's, again, why Tyreek Hill has been so successful. I think that's why some of these other, running backs and, wide receivers have been so successful in the NFL.
I love the Sonic the Hedgehog comparison. That now when I see him, I'm gonna think Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, I mean
that was really good.
That was honestly my first thought as well, because again, I'll be very honest. I don't like making player comparisons.
Yeah.
And going, this guy's going to be Tyreek Hill or whatever, because so much in the NFL is based on what staff you land into. But I watch him play and I go, God dang, he's faster than every other guy in the field. I'm watching it. I'm going, dude, you could put. I'm convinced you could put him like the Autobahn in Germany, and he could flat out outrun cars that are going 200 miles per hour. That's how fast he was. And I was like, dude, I'm watching him play against NFL caliber athletes, and he's outrunning them down the sideline. And you watch other fast wide receivers. I've watched a lot of fast wide receivers in my lifetime, and I've gone, yeah, he's really fast, but he's not that fast.
Yeah.
And you watch Calvin Austin, and if someone told me he was a burner, I'd go, yeah, okay, let me see it. I'd watch him and I'd go, holy crap, he is faster than everyone else on the field. And you could tell that on the first play you turned on in a game, because he would outrun a guy down the sideline. He might not get the ball, but you'd go, yep, that's Calvin Austin. And that there were plenty of times where if you didn't mark who he was on the field, I'd watch the play develop and look for the guy who was 50 yards down the field sometimes, with a guy 2 yards behind his back, and I'd go, yep, that's Calvin Austin.
Which, like you said, he's quick and fast.
Yeah.
A lot of guys have great straight line speed, but, they're one-trick ponies, as Mike Tomlin likes to call them. But if you have that quickness and that balance and that cutting ability, we talked about Hill is a comparison. I've never considered Hill the number one option. To me, it's Travis Kelce.
I never considered him the number one option either. I thought,
he's the more unstoppable guy, but having him opened up everything for Hill. Austin could have that same situation if Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, one of these guys becomes a true one and takes that, that double coverage and that defensive influence. Man, Austin could be in some great situations. So it's really exciting. And it's exciting to hear what, your comparisons and what you've seen in the past and how that might translate to the Steelers.
Yeah, and I'll tell anyone this: if you're skeptical of what I'm saying and you're saying, he's fast, he's not that fast, he's fluffing or whatever, turn on the 2021 Houston tape and watch the guy. First couple plays, think about it. He's playing NFL cornerbacks. He's playing guys who are taller than him, who were drafted in the NFL this year. There were plays where he was 2 yards behind, 2 yards behind these guys. And if there was a better throw, it was probably a catch and another 2 or 3 yards as well. But there were plays, the first play of the game, or kind of like later on in the first quarter or early second quarter, Marcus Jones, who was drafted by the Patriots, who was someone I thought was a really good cornerback in college, and particularly was someone who I thought could translate in the NFL. He does one little quick hesitation move. He doesn't ever lose speed. And that's kind of the biggest thing is guys will make hesitation moves and they'll kind of lose that speed for a minute because they have to recover. He doesn't have to lose that speed. He continues that speed and he separates for another yard. And in the NFL, if you can create a yard of separation by yourself, you're going to be a quarterback's favorite weapon because, in the NFL particularly, guys aren't 5 yards open all the time. Guys are, there's I think the term that everyone uses for quarterbacks, and, I think particularly was like Kenny Pickett this year was, even like Malik Wilson stuff, it was, can he throw NFL open? Because there's college open, there's NFL open, and they're two completely different things. I think Calvin Austin can be NFL open a lot because of his route running ability. And, again, for short guys, a lot of short guys don't have that route running ability because they've never been taught it. They've always just been told you're faster than everyone else. Just go out, run a guy. He learned a lot of the wide receiver technique of like footwork and selling different routes and, attacking weak spots in a cornerback and turning cornerbacks around. There's a lot of things that he did in college that I think can translate in the NFL, particularly a lot more than another smaller guy. Like John Ross was a first-round draft pick because he was really fast, not because he had wide receiver skills. Calvin Austin has wide receiver skills. So I think that's kind of what separates him from other guys.
I don't know if you heard Sauce Gardner, who was the number one corner taken, but when they asked him who his toughest cover was, and he said Calvin Austin the third. So, I mean, and that's the guy's the number one corner taken. So,
yeah, I mean, Sauce Gardner didn't allow a touchdown in college, and he played Jameson Williams, who was a first-round wide receiver. If he's telling you that the 5'7" guy from Memphis that he had to play once a year for 2 years is the toughest wide receiver he has ever had to play, you listen to him, because he didn't allow a touchdown in college. He played Jameson Williams and made Jameson Williams look like he was a pedestrian on the football field. And Calvin Austin had success against him. He's had success against NFL cornerbacks in the same sense of if he was Division II guy, and I was sitting here trying to tell you that the Division II guy is really dang good, and if you put him against NFL cornerbacks, he'll do it. He did it at the Senior Bowl. He did it against NFL cornerbacks in college. I think there's enough NFL tape where you can look at it and go, yeah, you know what, he may as well be an NFL wide receiver, and the fact that he played a lot of guys who were NFL ready.
All right. Thank you, Kevin, for coming on the show. It's been great talking to you. We're gonna give you a chance to, before you go, plug what you do for everyone, and then we'll give you a chance to go, and Shannon and I will finish off the show.
Yeah. So, I currently cover the American Athletic Conference for Underdog Dynasty, and I honestly, the best place to follow me would be on Twitter at the Kevin Fielder. You can come for my football takes and stay for my takes about fast food and sandwiches. But I'm not saying I'm a good follow, but I may as well be a fun follow. So that's I think half the battle.
All right, Kevin. Thanks for being on. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you.
Thanks, Kevin.
It's been a
Appreciate
great
it, guys.
show.
Anytime, man.
All right, thanks, man. All right, Shannon, before we get on, I know everyone in the live chat's been talking about it. Before we get on to the big Steelers news, really quickly, where do you think Calvin Austin ends up fitting into this Steelers offense? Put on your prediction hat, numbers, role, whatever. Where do you think he fits on this team? Can he be the number 3, number 4 receiver? Where do you think he ends up?
I don't think it's a lack of ability. I just think he has Johnson, Claypool, and Pickens all ahead of him. So I'm expecting him to be the wide receiver for kind of a gadget player, used in specific packages. I think he's going to make an impact. And I think that he will get an opportunity to return a punt or two. I think with his acceleration and, he's a little kamikaze. He's a little, he's a daredevil. He hits him holes at full speed. I could just see him taking a punt back at some point to, for a touchdown. So I think he'll be a wide receiver 4, and I think he'll make some impact. He could make more impact, but barring injury, he's got 3 pretty good guys ahead of him.
Well, I just like to think while he was talking there and you were listing off names, I was thinking, man, think of a set where you've got Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, Calvin Austin III, and Pat Freiermuth, all out there on the field.
Yeah.
And they're like sitting there saying, okay, our worst cornerback is on Calvin Austin III.
Yeah.
That's not a situation you want to be in. That's not a guy you want to sit there and say, we got, a guy like a James Pierre or a Justin Lane, who's primarily a special teams guy. And all of a sudden, they're sitting there lined up across from Calvin Austin III. That's the scenario I love to think about with this young man. But my high end prediction for him, a little bit crazy here, if you look at how the Steelers used Deontay Johnson last year, he was not much of a deep threat, but they put him out there in space, give him a lot of room to operate, and they really let him threaten with both out routes and anything going into the middle. And also they roll him deep, right? That's to me how you use Calvin Austin III. You put him out there at X, give him space, and you say whoever you have out there, they're not quick enough. They're not going to be quick enough to cover this guy, which is how Ben and AB torched the entire NFL is because you're not quick enough to stay with Antonio Brown, and Ben's going to hit him as soon as he's open. It's just easy yards. And I think we could see that if Calvin Austin III really develops, I think we could see him move into that role. And maybe you see Deontay Johnson off the Steelers after this season if Calvin Austin III really shows something. Obviously, that's high end and way premature. But I think Calvin Austin III has that kind of ability, especially if you don't ask him to be, running like the Chase Claypool routes, running those big power slants and the big posts deep and taking on safeties and stuff like that. If you're using him underneath and creating space, man, he's going to be really hard to deal with.
Yeah, just get him the ball, in his hands, get him in space in a mismatch. And it's so funny, last year you'd watch the offense and it was just it was just such a struggle. It was depressing. You just like, oh man, they almost had something there. Yeah. They didn't have that big play speed, that game changing speed. And now they might have two in Pickens and CA3. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. And then when you throw in, like you said, even Freiermuth too, well, that could be exciting.
Yeah. Oh, and if you've got Najee in there and this offensive line comes together and you're actually running the ball and some linebacker cheats up a little too far, he's just Calvin Austin III behind him and boom, he's running free on people. The possibilities are there. If this offense gets working, it has weapons to really take off. Now, we need to switch gears and talk about the biggest news of the day, and that is the retirement of Stephon Tuitt. He announced his retirement today, June 1st. Shannon, what did Stephon Tuitt, what's the legacy he's leaving behind here in Pittsburgh?
Stephon was an excellent player. I think in a lot of ways he might have been a better person. He always spoke his mind, even when it wasn't popular. But I admired that. He was a great teammate. I hate what's happened, but I'm happy for him. If this is the direction that he feels like his life is leading him, I'm happy for him. And I wish him nothing but the best. You have to have a passion to play at the highest level, or anything you do in life. You have to have a passion to be successful at the highest level. And that's why I've said all offseason I wanted him to try to move another direction, as if nothing more, just insurance, because I was concerned about that. And even though Hayward and Lulu and different guys kept saying, oh, he's working and he's coming back, you've seen guys try to come back too soon because they love football so much. They couldn't stay away. I mean, home life is, he's going through all this terrible stuff. That could have been his escape. For some people, the workplace or the athletic field is an escape. But for him, it wasn't. He didn't look at it that way. And once you lose that passion, it was time to move on. But I wish him nothing but the best, him and his family. And to me, he'll always be one of the best defensive ends in Steeler history, even though he only played 8 years.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I always thought of him whenever I saw him play, whenever I watch his film, I always thought of the phrase like a bull in the china shop. Because Tuitt was just like, you'd watch plays and you're like, I think he went away from where he was supposed to be. Like you could tell he was kind of had a responsibility. He didn't care. He was blowing up the play. Like he's in the backfield right in front of the running back. You know what? He's just in there blowing stuff up. And it always, I loved it as the team went on and you got into 2019, 2020, where he really took off, where he really shined. And you saw how the Steelers basically set him loose and were just like, go create havoc. And, Cameron Hayward, Bud Dupree, TJ Watt, the linebackers, they can all figure out how to make the play work after you just wreck stuff. And he was so good at that. And that combined with that smile he always had for me, I loved it. He had that, like, he had almost like a childlike, like a kid atmosphere around him where he could just go in, just absolutely do crazy stuff, just go in there, give it his all, have a smile on his face. He was always having fun. And I agree with you that if when the moment football stops being fun, the moment it stops being worth the work, you're not going to be good. You're not going to be good enough. You're not going to be the player you were. So, I wish him all the best. I wish him and his family all the best. And hey, like Chuck Noll said, you get on with your life's work, and it's time for Stephon Tuitt to get on with his life's work, and hope it's a good one. We have a super chat. Shannon, are you ready? Let's be read to you. I'm from Kentucky, so I'm a country boy. Shannon says he's born and raised a West Virginia country boy. Can I hear your best yeehaw? Shannon, why you be an honorary Duke boy with that yell? It's fantastic. Oh, man. All right, so we talked about Stephon Tuitt. I do want to quickly handle. I actually want to give a shout out to Dave Schofield. If anyone caught the Scobro show yesterday, David Schofield, he's talked about it. He's talked about it on Slack. He's talked about it different times, but he was like, he even said, he's like, I don't really want to bring this. I haven't really wanted to talk about this, but June 1st is a significant day because if Stephon Tuitt retired before June 1st, his entire nearly 10 million cap hit for the rest of his signing bonus would all come due immediately on the books for the 2022 season. If he waits till June 1st, the Steelers have the option to split that in half and take just under $5 million this year and just under $5 million next year. It comes to June 1st. He called it last night. He's like, there's a possibility you could see news happen. If he's going to retire, it could be tomorrow. And it did. That's where it came out. So I've heard a lot of people saying, I wish he would have let the Steelers know. I wish he could have, had them prepared for it. Stephon Tuitt couldn't formally announce his retirement before June 1st and also help the Steelers not be in trouble with the salary cap. So I want to get that out there for people wondering about that. Once he announces it, once you announce your retirement, you can't be like, hey, I'm retiring effectively June 1st. No, when you retire, you retire. So the Steelers most likely knew. I imagine what happened is Stephon Tuitt came and said, hey, you know what? This is my imagination. I don't have any insider knowledge. But I imagine he came to him and said, hey, you know what? I think I'm done. And the Steelers said, well, look, if you're going to retire, we prefer you retire after June 1st or after. So, take time, think it over. And if on June 1st, you still want to retire, then make it official, right? So that it actually was a process, and I believe that's most likely what happened. And the Steelers, I have an article coming out. I did one a little earlier about how Stephon Tuitt's decision would affect the Steelers coming back, whether he was full strength coming back, whether he was limited by injury coming back, or whether he didn't come back at all. And I laid some plans out there on their depth chart. Obviously, they have cap space right now to go out and try and bring somebody in. Shannon White, do you think the Steelers need to bring someone in? Do you think they will bring someone in? Looking at that situation, if you were the Steelers, would you go with what they have right now and kind of use that cap money elsewhere or save it? Or do you think it's a priority for the Steelers to bring in somebody that can fill Stephon Tuitt's shoes?
You already know what I think from our Slack channel discussions. I have to make a couple observations. I believe that last year that he approached them and said, I think I'm done. And they're like, well, don't make any haste decisions. Wait, see how this, we'll say, hey, your knees bothering you, everything like that. For them to take Leal, Anthony Wilbar pointed it out today. I think that was saying they kind of knew that Tuitt wasn't coming back. It also says a lot about what they think about Leal. So that bodes well. And I'm excited about that. However, I feel like they need, now that it's, they know the plan, they know what's, that he's retired, they need to pick up a proven veteran, run stopper. And I was really high on Hicks, and we've talked about him before. And then, of course, yesterday, I think Tampa Bay realized what might happen, and they're like, we're going to sign him the day before. And that was smart. But there is other guys out there, Dominican Sue and Williams, and there's some guys that are proven run stoppers. The reason why that's important, we know what Wormley can do. Loudermilk, we're thinking is going to take that next step. And those two guys, and also Montravius Adams. I'll say his name wrong. But him and Adams and Wormley are more pass rush guys. Adams he's that quick twitch guy who can penetrate. And then Wormley has shown he's really good but he's not a full-time starter. When you start him, his lack of functional strength and ability to, play the run gets exposed. If they bring in a guy, even if it's a guy who's a defensive tackle, say like Brandon Williams, you could slide Alulu out to play Tuitt's old position. And that way, you still, because Alulu can play either effectively.
Yep.
But they need another guy because we just don't know about Loudermilk yet. And Leal is unproven until he proves himself.
Yep.
So I believe that the one reason they didn't do anything, as you said, was because if they would have signed somebody earlier, then everybody would have, Tuitt's leaving. So to stop there from being a circus and unnecessary drama, they've waited. And I do think they're going to bring in somebody.
Okay. My thought on this, and I will, there's an article coming, I think possibly tomorrow, I have coming out on this. One of the questions marks I have is the Steelers normally carry 6 defensive linemen. If you go 6 deep on their roster right now, obviously Cameron Hayward's number 1, Alualu number 2. Let's go Wormley, then Loudermilk. That's 4. Then you've got Montravius Adams, and you've got DeMarvin Leal. That's your 6. If you add a new player, Wormley, Loudermilk, Adams, Leal, someone's gone. And those are pretty good names. Those are some pretty good players that bring some really good strengths to the team. I don't think you could cut him on Travius Adams and sign a defensive end. Obviously, you'd need a nose tackle at that point. You need a backup that can play inside. And what we really need is a defensive end, because we're going to be okay in the 2 defensive linemen when we go 4-man fronts, and it's going to be Highsmith and Watt and then 2 defensive linemen. We're going to be okay there. We've got guys for that. It's when we go into a 3-4 set, if teams try what they tried last year and run power at us there, who's the guy opposite Cameron Hayward locking down and facing off against the run? We know Wormley's not that guy. Isaiah Buggs wasn't that guy. Montravius Adams came in and really helped secure things simply because he could anchor against a double team. Like, he's not a great run stopper, but he could anchor against the double team and not get blown up. The Steelers need someone there, and the question to me is, between DeMarvin Leal and Isaiah Loudermilk developing from his first season, do they have that player on the roster? And that's the question the Steelers have to ask themselves. Do we have that player on the roster right now? Or do we need to go bring in that player? And they've got a little bit of time here. They're in OTAs. They're seeing these guys start to work out. They're getting an idea of where they are. And I think it's going to be very interesting and telling what the Steelers do going forward here.
If we remember, last year, the Steelers carried how many inside linebackers?
Yeah, they carried it.
They carried, what, 8?
Yeah, no, 5, 6, 7. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah, they carried a lot.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be one fewer inside linebacker. You could put Leal on the depth chart. It don't matter. Put him at edge.
Yeah.
The Steelers just re-signed to Skipper today. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I saw that.
So, but Leal could easily be on the depth chart. He could be on an outside linebacker position. He can still drop inside, so and play there. But I think you'll see one less inside linebacker this year, at least one. And I think you'll see an extra defensive lineman. And that's why I think they'll still pick up somebody. Because I really think they need to, because, I said today, what if Hayward was to get hurt?
Oh, yeah.
It's a disaster. It would be a disaster.
In my opinion, if Cameron Hayward goes down for the season, just cancel the rest of the season. Yeah. Don't even bother playing. Cameron Hayward, he's not
especially if you're going to try to run with them 2 undersized middle linebackers.
Yeah.
You know,
They
they're
need
they're
this
speed
defensive
guys.
line.
Yes, they need the beef up there. Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's gonna be interesting, especially with Brian Flores presumably taking over the front seven. You know, how is this front seven going to work? How are they going to redo all the schemes, the blitzing, everything? We're going to see a lot, and it'll be telling what they do with this position. If they bring in a guy, if they choose not to, if they bring in a smaller defensive line, or if they bring in a big space eater, there's going to be a lot. It's going to tell us a lot about where this defense is trying to go, how they react to the retirement of Stephon Tuitt. Shannon, we're running out of time here, so I'm going to give you a chance to let us know what you got coming, what people can look forward to from you.
Tomorrow morning, I've got an article dropping. It's talking about the secondary and how that James Pierre and Justin Lane are two guys that's not only competing with each other for a roster spot now, but they have quite a bit of competition, and how the Brian Flores influence, and especially if his aggressive nature, if it permeates into the defense this year, and they can play some more man coverage and get up there and play a little more bump and run. If they're able to do that, I think both of them can prosper. If they're allowed to be more aggressive. If they got to do this 5 yards off soft zone, neither one of them can run with guys if they can't get their hands on it. And so I think the Brian Flores factor is going to really help decide who ends up making the team and not. So that's what the article's about, and that's about all I got going on right now.
All right, I have an article coming soon, probably maybe tomorrow, on the situation with Stephon Tuitt gone. I go into both depth charts. Like, really, the defensive line is two depth charts. There's a 3-man front depth chart. There's a 2-man front depth chart to really get into what the Steelers need to work on with Stephon Tuitt gone. What is the need in that situation? Really dive deep into that. I've got that coming out. Dave Schofield and I worked on this before this idea. Maybe Dave had a premonition or something. But we have a Vertex coming out on Chris Wormley, what he brings. Obviously, I've been on record before. Everyone knows he was taken advantage of in run defense during the season. Mm-hmm. But I get more specific into what parts of run defense he's good at, what parts of run defense he's not, and why he is actually a pretty valuable player for the Steelers, as long as you can keep him out of certain situations. That's coming out soon. So look forward to that. Great show today. We had a great time with our guests, talking Calvin Austin III, talking Stephon Tuitt. I want to thank everyone in the live chat for participating. I was reading it, having a good time reading the live chat while we were talking here. As always, check out all this Behind the Steel Curtain podcasts, and check out BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. This offseason, we're covering everything, all the steps, every part of it. You can get your news, you can get your coverage, you can get your discussions, your opinion pieces, all of it on BehindTheSteelCurtain.com and on our Behind the Steel Curtain podcasts. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Shannon. Thanks again to our guest. And as always, have a good week, everyone. And go Steelers.